Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 86 of the podcast is Jeff McManus, lead cultivation officer of the Jeff McManus Group and director of landscape services at the University of Mississippi. We had Jeff on episode 46 of Amidon Planet to talk about his book, Growing Weeders into Leaders, Leadership Lessons from the Ground Level. Well, he is back to talk about his latest book, Cultivate, Tailgate Huddles to Grow Stronger Teams, which I would describe as like this leadership conversation, like catalyst, right? Something to get talking about the principles of good leadership in an informal environment, I guess, like a tailgate of a truck. So, as always, just know that during this conversation, Jeff and I will not be able to communicate the whole value of his book. And even if we did, it would be from our perspective. In other words, if you like what you hear, get the book for yourself. You can find the book on bookshop.org. That's a website committed to helping local independent bookstores thrive in the age of e-commerce. A link to bookshop.org can be found in the show notes of this episode, which would be amidonplanet.com/episode 86, where your purchase will not only support local booksellers, but also the production costs of the Amidon Planet podcast. So, or also, you know what, better yet, wander down to your local bookseller like Square Books here in Oxford, Mississippi, and pick up a copy. All right, let's not delay. Here's my conversation with Jeff McManus on his book, Cultivate, Tailgate Huddles to Grow Stronger Teams. Hey, welcome back to Amidon Planet, Jeff. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Well, I was looking back, Jeff. We're on, I think I just posted, by the time this goes out there, about episode 84. We talked on episode 46, talking about your book, Weeders to
Growing Weeders.
Episode, yeah. My title for the episode was Teaching Weeders to be Leaders. So that's why I was tripping over it. But that was a great conversation with a great text. And now we're back again to talk about another book.
Yes, Cultivate. We are. Yes.
Tailgate Huddles to Grow Stronger Teams. And I love it, Jeff. I love what I really love about it, the size of it. Because it feels like it could go in your back pocket almost. It's something you can carry around with you or easily throw into a bag. And I think that's kind of the point of it, right? I don't know.
That's right.
How did this book come to be?
Well, it's supposed to be convenient. It's right. And it's supposed to be light reading, quick reading. And it's kind of the way we're set up now. From the generations now, we have gone, as technology has become more prevalent, our attention spans are a lot shorter. And the book, short stories, supposed to be just like you said, pocket size. It's a 5x7. It's could take a little beating, a little banging here and there, a nice little cover, but it's supposed to be a workbook, right? It's really a workbook for people to be successful out in the field.
Yeah. Too, even saying like tailgate huddles to grow stronger teams. And on the cover, you got a picture of two guys sitting on a tailgate. It looks like they're growing stronger just sitting there. I love the image is good. The title's good. Everything's good.
I appreciate it. I had to recruit those guys from our church. So it was pretty funny. I said, I'm going to make y'all famous.
That's right. Yeah.
But I'm not going to pay you anything. So they was like, oh man. Exactly.
Hey, so Jeff, describe so you talk about like the light reading and being able to carry it with you. So what's the general format of the book?
Well, the format is just, it's a character or a word or a short description. So to begin with, just to open up. So you may have the word coachable. Yeah. That's the word. That's the title of the chapter, coachable. And we give a quick little definition. They're not definitions I looked up. They're definitions that came from how I use that word. Mm-hmm. And then there's a quote. And then there's just a simple story, really short, maybe 2-3 paragraphs. And then there's some questions. And the intent is that, we learn with stories. We learn by others. And it's like a case study. They're fictional, but they're based on true stories. And the question gives people the opportunity to talk about something besides what we're doing today, right? What's the work list look like? This gives us opportunity to go a little deeper and to help build culture.
Yeah. And we did some talking. I'm like, man, we're spoiling the podcast here, but I did some talking about some other kind of texts that it kind of reminds me of. One was Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success. We just did an episode on that. I talked about it with my friend Shane, where we kind of revisited one of Coach Wooden in his pyramid of success, he has these individual characteristics, kind of like this, where he'll talk about, define it, have a short story. But then also too, thinking about Horst Schulze in his book, in his practice when he was running the Ritz-Carlton, having these stand-up meetings where they would talk about some sort of principle or concept from, they're running running the hotels and having these meetings where, hey, let's come up with some common language, some common vernacular, some common understandings about what we're trying to do here. And there's power there. I mean, those are some successful people that Horst Schulze and Coach Wooden that thinking about these sorts of things. Like, I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff you're working with.
Well, I don't claim to have any original ideas myself. So I mean, you put me in a great class there, but that's who I learned from. I learned from, and great leaders do learn from other great leaders, right? So I feel like John Wooden was one of the best. I mean, he won 11 national championships in basketball. I mean, that was just unheard of. It still is. And then Horsey, who you just mentioned, I got to meet him for the first time about 2 months ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it was just neat to hear him talk in front of the group. But I had always admired him from afar because I had seen his material. I had heard how the Ritz-Carlton did the stand-up huddles. And so I borrowed some of those concepts from these leaders and to create this. Now, this is really written for the green industry, right? For landscapers, Parks and Rec, and that's the audience. That's the stories around. But the stories work for, I don't care what you're doing.
Right.
You're going to talk about an initiative, right? So this just gives you a place to talk about that. And, as one of the words. So, yeah, I would say that I didn't necessarily recreate anything, but I just put a spin on it for leaders to use. And I just got a text from a guy who is in South Carolina, and he's a business owner. He has 5 locations. And he said, we just did our first story in Cultivate. And he said, it went great. He goes, I can't wait to do this for the rest of the year. So he was super pumped about the book.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, making the connection to Horst, it was like you couldn't go to work unless you talked about one of these sorts of things. And so that was the way that he did it. But have you heard about how people are how is this business owner using it? Is he using it once a day, or is he once a week, or is it, every other?
I'm not sure. That's probably a good follow-up. I set it up to use it thinking in my head that you could use it once a week. But again, that could be too much. Wouldn't it be great to use it once a day? Yeah. Right. There's 32. And so it gives you a little extra one, but literally, you forget a lot of things, but it gives again repetition, which is how we learn. So I really didn't think people would use it every day, and I haven't heard yet, but I did get that text. So I need to follow up and see how he's using it.
Well, I mean, it is. So there's the 32 words, and I like that they're in alphabetical order too. So if you're looking to find one that you really like, you can go back to it fairly easily. What I like, Jeff, too, is that when I was, paging through some of the other texts that we talked about, but then looking at this one, you're bringing up words like circle back and, having is it high standards? Is that exactly?
Yeah.
High standards. Yep. Initiative. Yeah. Being dependable, like these things that we hear, it's almost like buzzwords sort of stuff, or like taking in the big picture, or what's your blind spot, or like things that you hear that people throw in, but not necessarily ever like putting a pin on what are you actually talking about by circling back, right? What are you actually talking about by having high standards? And here again is your definition, your quote, and your story, and around coming back and like having, now we have a common understanding by going through this as a team, a common understanding of these words that again, just kind of get thrown around sometimes. Maybe it was that sort of thing that, hey, make sure, are we all on the same page here? Are we all talking about the same thing? Was that sort of the motivation for some of these words that you put in the book?
Absolutely. I mean, take this simple word, trust. You and I have when we think of that, most people have a general understanding, but this gives us an opportunity to talk about, hey, when you call in late 4 out of the 5 days of the week, what does it do to trust?
Yeah.
Right. And we don't always associate our actions with trust. But yet our actions is what builds our trust or tears it down. And so, yes, it's to help us with that commonality, eye for detail. I put that in there because in the discovery, eye for detail can mean a lot of different things. Even in the plant world, when we talk about this on a major college campus, having an eye for detail, in what area? Are you talking about turf? Are you talking about the trees? Are you talking about the shrubs, the flowers, and litter? And so when we start breaking it down into smaller groups, and we're managing a large property, that helps us get clarity on what eye for detail means. And so, yes, it was very intentional to try to get people to have that, because once you get clarity and you're communicating, man, it speeds up production. It makes you more efficient because we're using the same language and we quickly communicate. So yes. Yeah. Good eye.
Well, I mean, and two, I mean, you designed this again for, your field and thinking about, landscaping and general maintenance folks. And so thinking about some of the conversations that I've heard Horst Schulze have, and when he's talking about people in the hotel industry, of the dishwashers, the waiters, the bus boys, those that are cleaning rooms, and thinking about, if, well, and I'll put it in the same way that I think that he did, and maybe you'd say the same thing. If you don't show up to work one day, it might be okay. But if they don't show up to work, well, that's a big problem, right? And Horst Schulze would say, if we're not checking people in, if we're not cleaning the dishes, if we're not making the beds, that's a big problem. If I don't show up, things will still keep going on. But if you all don't show up, that's a big deal. So like investing in the folks that are frontline workers, frontline people that are going to that are the face of the organization is pretty important.
Well, we have to take on our role as a leader, is that we're really growing leaders. If you want to be successful and you want to have a culture where everything is running smoothly and your customers are wowed by it and you're making money and you actually have free time and you can go on vacation, grow your people. Cultivate the greatness in them, grow them, and empower them because you can trust them. But if you don't want to, and you like to be the center of attention, and you like the drama, and you like for everybody to have to come to you to get the answers, then don't grow your people. Keep them at the same level. Don't tell people things. Make people have to work in crisis mode all the time. You'll stress people out. People will leave, and it depends on how you want to manage. And I have found the latter part of my career, the more I grow my people, the better my quality of my life is, the better the properties are, and they do so much better. They love working here. So that's it's a win for everybody when you grow people.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm coming from a education mindset, and even thinking too about having a common understanding about these terms within like a school, right? Or in a department here at the university, and thinking about, well, what does this mean? And what does this look like within our context? What are our stories for each of these words? And how do we line up that way? And so like having that, again, sort of alignment that's going on when you're doing this book, like that's pretty important. Because then also too, like you're saying, if the leader can sit back and let his people do the things that his or her people do the things that they need to do, and they're in line with this common DNA, well, then that does make for a great day at work, right?
That's right. So just like for us is our folks get asked for directions daily, right? There's lost parents, there's lost students. And so our folks are the ones out in the field. They're out there interacting. Well, how do you want them to respond to that? And they need, if you don't tell them, they'll figure out, and it may or may not be what you want them to do. So you have to have those conversations. Silly things like even how they're working in their zones or their areas, and they're approached by people or people invade their space. It's really not their space, but the common space is, how do you want them to interact? How do you want them to do that? And once you start getting this solidified, and that people know, then you really can move on to those next levels. You can just go beyond. You don't have to. You're not dealing with emergency phone calls. You're not dealing with people calling and being upset about things because they're just not. Those bad things aren't happening as much.
Yeah,
and that's what I have really enjoyed. Is my phone just doesn't ring that much for crisis mode anymore because our folk, I feel like we're much more on the same page.
Yeah. I wonder too, this is just curious, like, do people come up and like, well, some of your team is out working, like putting some plants in, because I see them on the one entrance I go by when I drop off my student or my kid at a school, and I'm coming into campus and I see like they're completely redoing a bed. And like, I wonder if some folks that see that happening come up like, hey, what are you planting? Like, and like asking all sorts of, like, I can never get my plants to look like this. What do you all do? Like, you trying to get advice and things like that? Does that happen?
Absolutely, all the time. And so we want our people to be the experts. We don't want them to go, I don't know, this is just what they told me to do. Right. And a lot of our people we hire don't know very few plant names. They know very little about the plant. So we want them to be the experts. So we work hard to train them about what the plant name is, what this plant likes, and get them thinking and talking. And a lot of times now when I'm asked to speak about plants, I'm either letting one of my staff members do it or at least go with me and let them do part of it, because I want them to grow their confidence. And I want them to tell that person how to do those things. Yeah, you got to do this. You got to make sure you get 8 hours of sunlight and all those type of things. So absolutely.
That's right. So we've already kind of touched on some of these things, like thinking about some of the connections to teaching, and this is obviously a teaching book, right? And you're doing things to teach these common words and common terms. We talked about the power of having a common vocabulary, common vernacular. Was there anything else like within that, well, or at least two, maybe even thinking about how did you select the words that you did, and what was maybe some of that process?
The way I selected the words is I kept sort of a running list in my head of what terms I kept hearing over and over. And then I would interview, especially some of our staff, and just ask them and just listen to them talk and things that they would say. Pinch points for me or pain points, a lot of times like circling back, closing that loop on communication. That's a big one for me, is because you send something out to be taken care of, but if you never hear back, you don't know if that got completed. So it was a process of those areas just to work out those words on that, and then trying to make sure that those words have alignment in other industries as well, like extra mile or second mile. That was something that Chick-fil-A has taught us. Dan Cathy really was the master of second mile service, and then but I learned that most people say the extra mile, that they don't say second mile. So just, doing those kind of research a little bit and figure what works best.
And how did you decide to jump right into using these stories to communicate these important concepts?
We learn with stories, right? We see the teachers of all ages of the generations. It's stories. Every time as we listen to the professionals talk, people say use stories. People love stories. You keep their attention, and it's so true. We love a good little story, and so that's what I found is, how can I teach this principle? How can I teach this word dependable? How can I put that in a positive story so that we can, maybe it's memorable for that person who listens, and they walk away with that. Now their life has changed for a better reason, or for something positive through that story.
Yeah. I was reading the Work Smarter, Not Harder page or chapter in the book, and the story about the moving a wheelbarrow, right? Because they're like digging out some dirt and they're just throwing the dirt to the wheelbarrow, with it. One of the people in the story moves the wheelbarrow closer in order to just put it directly into the wheelbarrow. I'm like, well, why'd you do that? We could have just, like, that's just a waste of time. Why don't we could just keep throwing the dirt over there? And the guy's like, well, if it's harder to do that, it's harder to throw it. It also gets messier, and we'd have to clean up that. And after we're done, we still have to finish by cleaning up the dirt that would miss the wheelbarrow. And so we'll get it done. We'll get it done quicker, and we'll be out of here. So it's the idea of, it's a very simple thing, but I can think of all many different ways that I've done things where I didn't do that, and it caused me to that thing that I was trying to I thought I was going to shortcut, that ended up being longer because I didn't work smarter. Like I definitely worked harder in those cases. But simple, I like the simple stories that do that.
Well, the way you grew up, the way I grew up, and then the way our listeners grew up, we all had influences in our lives that really shaped us. And I didn't realize how my dad had shaped me, and then my older brother, in that make the job easier, right? Don't Bring that wheelbarrow closer. Be efficient. And that really has got into my DNA. I really realized this over Christmas holidays that I was working with my brother-in-law and we were building out some of his shop stuff. And apparently I'm a real process person, because as we were doing it, I just started lining up things to go quicker. Not everybody thinks like that, right? And when you hire people in, they don't think about efficient. They're just thinking we get off at 3:00, and they're not thinking about we got to be efficient because we have to make money in order to be sustainable, and that's true in higher ed. We have to stay within budget, or we have to meet budget because our bosses have choices. They can pick other people to do this landscaping. It doesn't have to be us, right? Yeah. And so we got to be efficient, and that's what I'm hoping that those spinoffs from conversations like that leaders can have those conversations.
Yeah, that's a lesson too. That. I mean, even the working smarter and harder, being efficient with teaching as well. Like I remember, I'd always keep a clock in my head of I'd have like maybe 100 students in a semester when I was teaching high school math, maybe more than that, and thinking about, okay, if I'm giving this assignment and I'm going to be grading it, one, I want to make sure that every single problem on there is doing something for the student to demonstrate some sort of understanding. Because if it's not, that's 120 times however much time it took to grade that one. If it's not doing anything for me, then what are we doing? And then also thinking about the process for which I'm doing it. Like, am I going to just look at every front page, or am I going to page through every single one and grade it? Like, versus no, it made more sense to do it that way, to look at the same page at the same time, because that was more efficient that way. Then I was in the mindset of looking at one problem and thinking about all the different ways that kids could be solving it. The efficiency pieces, and it's those same lessons can be taught when we're working with plants, or when we're working in the classroom. Same thing.
I have to, just a funny side story. I have to turn that efficiency button off when it comes to family time and relationship times, right? Because I still some of us are just wired that way. Mm-hmm. So I had to tune that down a little bit. We're playing games, and okay, it's not all about efficiency, Jeff. It's just it's fun.
Yeah, exactly it. And then also too, this idea of, again, like the picture on the cover kind of shows the intent for how this is used, but like this idea of learning together, and I think we know how powerful it is when we learn together, but like, what are some of the things that you've seen with this idea about learning together and the power of that within what you do at the university?
Well, people think about it, Joel. If our bosses come up to us and ask us our opinion, Joel, I'd like your opinion on this. I'd like your feedback on this. Can you give me some input? What does that say? I mean, one, he values you, or she values you, and wants what you say, and says that your words matter. They're important to our organization. We need that. Yeah. So the process of this allows us to interact with our teams, and hopefully we can get them to interact and talk. Because when people hear themselves saying things and they talk about their values, it really solidifies it in their habits and their behaviors and their thoughts. And so I do this on campus with our staff, and my whole goal is not for me to talk to them or give my point. I want them to interact and say and answer questions. I love it when they come up with questions, but when they're giving their input and answering things, letting them hear themselves talk that way, really, I have found, matures them and it grows them.
Yeah.
And they're talking in front of their peers now, and they're saying things that are how they believe. And now we've got some commonality. We got some things that we grow as a team. Yeah, I believe like that too. Yeah, we should, in order to build trust, we got to be here on time. We can't wait till 5 after, because that frustrates everybody, because they're trying to leave and go. And yeah, that makes sense. And so you don't get to have those conversations in a group very often. So I have found if we pause and do those conversations, it makes us stronger, and it makes it, honestly, it makes us more efficient, because when we trust each other, the speed of trust, production goes up. But when we don't trust each other, everything slows down.
Yeah. And I guess too, there's one other thing that I think kind of ties into that, but also with this idea of learning together, but the idea of the context in which you're learning together. I mean, and again, you put on the cover, like, two guys sitting on a tailgate, like talking versus, or like, in Horst Schulze, he talks about the stand up huddle kind of space, and like the importance of content. If you put that same conversation in a classroom, right, in another context, it wouldn't have the same thing where we're standing around, we're in the place that we already work, we talk to these people. Now we're just talking about these concepts or these words together, and like how important that is versus like like, and then tying into that also ties into the stories too that you're using, like context matters, right? This context of where we're doing, how we're doing it, to make sure that it is a safe place to, you might be trying out some words that you haven't used. Maybe like never, I don't think I have actually used the word circle back into a conversation, but if we have a common understanding about it and we've talked about it, like, hey, when I say circle back, it actually means something, but I need a safe place to try that out. And that could be in these conversations that you're having with your team.
That's true. I mean, something that you just said about the picture, I don't know if I did this intentionally or not, but I'm going to say I did, since you just brought this up as a good point. But if you ever pick up a product at the store and you don't know what it is, you instantly are looking for a picture that shows you quickly how to use that product, right? And the packages that don't show you that just are full of context, it's harder to understand. It's just, you want a quick, easy diagram to understand. And I feel like what you're saying here is, yes, this is a great way to apply it on literally on a tailgate. In a huddle, right? Yeah. And that's your stand-up meeting. And so that's what I'm hoping, because a lot of the groups that I do work with and talk to, they're getting ready to go out in the morning. Maybe you just you stop for 5 minutes and have a huddle, and that's the bigger the companies that are wanting to become even more successful realize that they have to have alignment with their team, right? From top to bottom, it's got to be alignment. But if nobody is working on alignment at all levels, it doesn't magically happen. It takes effort to get alignment, and Cultivate, the book, will help get alignment in organizations of the core values, I believe.
Yeah, and I think, there's, again, I could say the same thing, like having a classroom conversation. I actually do something a little similar to this, where I have like 5 behaviors that we kind of talk about in my classrooms, and we'll do one every day. And so it is like a 2 to 3 minute thing, and we're in a classroom space, so that works because we're all teachers. But even thinking about reinforcing and saying, so when I say stay fit, like the kids know that I'm not just talking about, physical fitness, but I'm talking about mental fitness. I'm talking about spiritual fitness, possibly talking about like taking care of one's needs in order to make sure you're rested and all that good stuff. And so there's potential there for that. Yeah. And also going back to context, like one thing I forgot to say is, like, one of our doctoral students here at the university is studying the use of vertical non-permanent surfaces for doing math problems. So rather than doing them at pen and paper at your desk, like standing up and doing them at a marker board on the wall, right? And they're showing, and there is research to say, like, there is a difference, like the simple difference of just standing up together, like in kind of a huddle and learning together in that space. There's something different about that, right? And so, like, hey, I'm just saying there's research behind what you're doing too.
Well, that's good. That's good. The academics like you help yourself and your colleagues help validate, what others have done, and then I'm just trying to give us a niche, give our team our niche, a tool that you have already proven and research says it works. So, but here's the thing: if you don't read it and you don't use it, it doesn't work.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like going to your classroom if you don't do the work.
Right.
Those students are the ones that may struggle.
Yeah.
In other things.
Well, also too, you've seen this work. I mean, like we talked about the success of, some of these other, authors. We were talking about, you've seen success in what you're doing. And so it's like it that the fact that in a book, you're trying to capture some of these things and then share it. And I like that with this book, and then also with your previous book.
I think one of the big things that I listened to we had a speaker come in yesterday. I hired a guy came in from Chicago, and he's awesome. But the one difference that I kept hearing is he hasn't been doing what I'm doing, right? So, my daytime hustle, working with teams and working with property management and doing those type of things. And that's where I draw from the experience that I have, where his was good, but he wasn't able to, he can't teach to me how I'm teaching. And I'm not going to teach like he does, and that's fine. But I just feel like, man, there's something about taking lessons from somebody who's gone through the trenches and has actually had to do, like when you have a crew of people who just sit there and give you, like, they cross their arms, they got sunglasses on inside the room, and they're not showing you any love, right? They're not going to give you any warm fuzzies, and they're just kind of like, you just kind of feel like, holy cow, why is there so much tension in the room? Yeah. I've had to do that. Often I speak to a lot of people who have that mindset. I hate this kind of stuff or whatever. And how do you get them to lean in and participate? And so I think because of what I've been doing this for a while, it's kind of given me the edge in helping people, soften the hearts of some of those hard ones and help crack it and start building that good team where culture matters. I spoke to a group at another university last month, and one of their things is their people were saying, we don't want to go to a meeting. We don't want to do any meetings. Well, what was happening, and you kind of read between the lines, they didn't want accountability. And so they were really pushing back on the meetings, and we were able to unpack a little bit of, like, first of all, let's talk about what's the purpose of a meeting.
Right.
And for them, it was like, oh, they're boring, they're long, It's like, well, that's not the purpose, right? The purpose is, and then we just kind of listed, sometimes it was like to communicate, but then we started talking about really a meeting's about development, because the leader doesn't always have to lead the meeting. You could actually lead the meeting. Then the faces, everybody was like, what? You're going to make me lead the meeting? And it's just, it was fun to unpack it, because people get these perceptions and these ideas, and they don't want to do it. So the leader kind of caves into it. Yeah. And so you've got to know how to work around that and soften it, pour some water on it, let it get loose, and then plow it up a little bit.
Yeah. There you go. So Jeff, I'm sure in writing the book that you're kind of gleaning some things from your own experience. You're like you said, you had some conversations with, your employees to talk about, hey, what are some things that are popping up to you? What are some words to be able to use? What are some stories possibly? So what have you done differently having written this book?
I think for me, this book is because the intellectual property was mine, right? It came from me. And Weeders to Leaders, my first leadership book, was a lot of what I had done, the past, the story. Yeah. So this book was a little bit more nervous in launching it, because how will it be perceived? How will it be used? And so that to me was a little bit more of a challenge to me to do that, as opposed to telling you, hey, this is how we've done it in the past, and this is how we've been successful. So it's pushed me out of my comfort zone. Every book I've written 3, have pushed me out of my comfort zone, right? Yeah. Don't wish it was easier, wish I was better. And so I'm working to be better, right? So that it comes more natural.
Nice. So in the beginning of the book, and again, I appreciate this, because you got to teach people, teaching people how to participate, is in the beginning of the book, you give some instructions for how to use the book. How would you not want readers to use this book? What cautions might you have?
I think there's 2 things. One is you don't use it. One, you just don't read it. But then second is, I have seen this, and it's rare, really, it's just unfortunate, but I've seen leaders in positions who use things like this to manipulate their group, right? They use it to hold over their heads, and they use it as a scare tactics and stuff, and things can be twisted. Just for example, I'll give you a quick example. Our bosses have a choice on who they want to do the landscaping here at Ole Miss. We can be an in-house operation, or they could outsource it. They could outsource it to another company. If I'm a leader who's not valued in core principles of honesty and trust and integrity, I may use that and say, if y'all don't do your job, we're gonna just outsource y'all. We're gonna get rid of y'all. Mm-hmm. And now I'm using a fear tactic.
Yeah.
Right. And I've seen that happen. And it's not pretty. And that's not the way that should be done. But we need to just have that discussion and say, why would they pick anybody else? Because we're going to be the best. We want to be the best of the best. And we're going to be so top notch that our folks are going to be they're going to be bragging on us on how good we are. Yeah. Right. And to me, that's this latter approach is a better approach. And so I think if you took the book, you could twist it that way.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, one thing we do, we're at Amazon Planet, we're trying to learn how to teach better. And again, you're writing books, you're talking both to your employees, but I know you also talk to other organizations that you mentioned a couple of times here in the conversation. What is the best thing on the top of your mind? What's the best thing you have learned lately to help you teach better?
Listen. I mean, how many times do we have to relearn that? Mm. Listen, I have found the best leaders, the leaders who are at the higher levels, are really good listeners. People will cut them off when they're talking, and they stop talking and listen. They listen. And to me, that's an important lesson, is to continually listen. Ask good questions and listen. And if you're around really, really good people which is all the time, take notes, right? Mm-hmm. Take notes. And so that's probably my takeaway on that.
Well, I'm just tying it back to that example you gave before about the group that did not want any more meetings, right? The leader could have heard that, just that one comment, and went, oh, okay, I need to maybe make shorter meetings, make less meetings, and do all this sort of stuff, acquiesce to whatever the demands are. But then you're talking about, wait, let's unpack this. So that does mean asking questions and listening and hearing, like, what's the motivation here? What are we trying to, what's the reason for this comment? Not just like putting your own thinking and own understanding on it, but actually then like, no, let's say more. Let's dive into that, which means, again, more listening.
So, and you're right. That's exactly what the leader had done. They had stopped having meetings, and he was actually trying to call them something else so that they could have something, do something. Mm-hmm. But they were undermining him. They did not have alignment. And when you don't have alignment in the organization, you're going to be inefficient and you're going to struggle in a lot of areas. So getting alignment with our core values, and then the way we work, our communication is critical. And I think helps us have the book Cultivate, helps us have those conversations to get alignment.
Yeah. So like one of the things that I'm going to be doing this next semester is I teach like our basic kind of learning how to lesson plan and design and enact instruction. And one of the things we talk about is the importance of making sure students have an understanding of the vocabulary. Can they define it? Because when we start using words and things that the students don't understand, and you're starting there, and like, so you can't even communicate basically, is if you don't have that same common vocabulary, that there's not that understanding vocabulary. Well, then all the other stuff that you're trying to accomplish, all these loftier things, are not going to happen because you already can't communicate. And right. So I appreciate that about the book. And like, that's where it's starting. It's starting with, hey, when we're talking about this is what we mean. And so I think that's a great way to align and get everyone on the same page within an organization.
We don't realize in our own little culture, we have our own little language. Mm-hmm. And if you ever get around anybody who was former military, they speak in acronyms, right? That's how, yeah, and they all know them, and they speak in them quickly. I have a good friend who works on campus, a former Navy guy, 22 years in the Navy, but he speaks in acronyms. So we were at dinner the other night, and I was like, "So what does that mean? What do those three letters mean?"
Yeah.
Slow down. I don't know what you're talking about. And he's an engineer by trade, and so it's funny. And it's just total engineer mode. So, yeah, and even our little landscape department, we have our own little culture, our own little language, and we don't realize people don't understand what it means to circle back. They don't know what it means, I for detail. Yeah. What does it mean to adapt and overcome, right? That's one of our core values. And so, yeah, you've got to have that you actually want to unpack it because ultimately you want them to be successful.
Right.
If they're successful, the organization's successful. You'll be successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great, Jeff. So besides the book, again, the book is Cultivate Tailgate Huddles to Grow Stronger Teams, which is available in all the places that you want to get books. Anything to promote?
Well, I'm getting, I'm really excited about 2023 because I'm going to start a community. I want to start a community of people who are leaders who want to go to the next level, whatever that is, and it's going to be a cross culture of leaders. And so I'm just looking forward to starting that as a peer group, basically a peer group. It'll be a group of people to kind of encourage one another, hold each other accountable, and help each other see things that we may not see ourselves because we're too close to it. So I'm really excited about my peer group that's starting this year.
Nice. And we'll put links to the book, links to your website, because there's opportunities that people can, you got your other books that people may want to get. And then also too, if they want to get you to set up an event, there's also links there for that too, as well. So we'll put links to that all in the show notes. And so people can access that.
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thanks for your time, Jeff. Appreciate it. That is going to do it for this episode of the Amidon Planet podcast. Show notes can be found at amidonplanet.com/episode 86. Now, for those of you looking for ways to support the podcast, you can submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amidonplanet.com. We love seeing those and just getting a little interaction. I don't do a lot of lecturing in my classes, so it's great anytime get some interaction with folks from either these face-to-face interactions or also sending an email to joel@amidonplanet.com. So looking forward to receiving those. You can also subscribe, rate, and review, and share this episode, which will allow more people looking for similar content in order to find it, right? So, and as always, you can follow at Amidon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amidon Planet Facebook page. In addition, you can subscribe to the Amidon Planet download, which contains teaching resources and updates from Amidon Planet. Finally, check out the Amidon Planet store or Amidon Planet bookshop. Links are in the footer at amidonplanet.com, where your purchases support the production costs of the podcast. Thank you for spending time on Amidon Planet. Thanks to Jeff for sharing his time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do.